Good morning. Jó reggelt kívánok. Mindenkinek Budapesten. It's an honor to be with you, at least virtually. I'm terribly sorry that I can't be there in person. I just want to welcome and say hello to so many distinguished guests, colleagues, friends of the Equilibrium Institute. I had so looked forward to joining you in person, and I apologize that events took their course and I had to return from Europe to Washington, where I'm speaking with you today. In fact, just some meters from the Mellon Auditorium, where the NATO North Atlantic Treaty was signed in 1949, and where we just recently celebrated the 75th anniversary of NATO. I was honored, of course, to be invited. So pleased to see a conference of transatlanticists taking place in Budapest, in Hungary. I understand there are a record number of participants, and I really am sorry to miss seeing old friends and colleagues, or should I say friends of long standing, since old certainly describes the way I feel these days. But including friends like Geza Jasenski and Zsolt Németh, and of course Tamás Boros and Reeker Zemerkényi. I've been looking forward to joining you all for in-person discussions in a city that holds a special place in my heart and soul, both professionally and personally. As many of you may know, as a U.S. diplomat, I served in Budapest twice. I arrived in 1993, where I took up the role as the third secretary and assistant information officer at the U.S. Embassy in Szabadságtér. It was an exciting time, sometimes hard to recall the optimism of the 1990s in Hungary. It was thrilling as a society and a country was regaining its confidence after so many years under communism. Under Soviet authorities, the Russian troops had only recently left Hungary, and we were very active in engaging with our Hungarian friends, renewing strong U.S.-Hungary ties in every aspect, including security. Of course, personally, for me, it was exciting to come to the country where my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, was born, where I had cousins, and those that had left and made a new life in the United States, like generations of Hungarians, had told me stories over many years of Hungary, of the beauty of Budapest they left behind, and yet the sadness of what befell through fascism and communism. It was also, of course, in Budapest that I met my wife Solveig, who was also serving at the U.S. Embassy, and so personally for us, Hungary will always have a very strong place in our hearts. And we returned together in 2004 when I became the Deputy Chief of Mission, then under Ambassador George Herbert Walker III, to continue building the strong relationship with Hungary. And by then, Hungary, of course, was a NATO ally. During my first tour, we focused not just on important issues like helping free and independent media to develop by encouraging study abroad and study in the United States in particular, but also on what was known as transatlantic security architecture and the future of European security architecture, how it would evolve in the future in this post-Cold War era that was still so new after decades, generations of a particular world order. The whole concept of transatlantic security architecture, which of course refers to geopolitical and defensive structures that emerged after World War II, primarily involving cooperation between North America and Europe, especially through NATO, and the focus on military alliances, defense strategies, and maintaining global peace and security was a critical element of this, and we worked on this very much with our Hungarian colleagues. In 1993, of course, it was uncertain when Hungary might join NATO, along with other countries from Central and even Eastern Europe. These were questions that were being focused on and discussed. recalling that in 1949, of course, the leaders of 12 countries then, including U.S. President Truman, had come together in the Mellon Auditorium here in Washington, just 4 years since the surrender of the Axis powers, the end of the most devastating world war that we had ever seen. And these 12 leaders took a sacred pledge. President Biden recalled this pledge at the 75th anniversary just a couple months ago. This important pledge to defend each other against aggression, provide for collective security, and to answer threats as one. Because they knew that to prevent future wars, to protect democracies, to lay the groundwork for a lasting peace and prosperity, they needed a new approach. They needed to combine their strengths. They needed an alliance. And so that was the creation under the Washington Treaty of NATO, which I agree is the single greatest, most effective defensive alliance in the history of the world. And so I wanted to speak a little bit this morning on the concept of strategic and defensive security architecture, because I think it's important to recall what that means. And I got interested in the idea of architecture as it pertains to our security and our defense, something that we share across this great transatlantic space. And so I started playing a little bit with ChatGPT, something that certainly didn't exist in 1993 when I first came to Budapest, but which, of course, through AI and Hungarian contributions to science and the world of computer science, is something we're all very familiar with. And again, Hungary has a great role in that as well. It was something that then made me think about the mid-century sense of NATO, which was created in 1949, and mid-century modern in terms of architecture. Mid-century modern refers to a design movement that gained popularity in the mid-1940s through the late 1960s in the United States and in Europe, certainly at least in Western Europe. And it was characterized by clean lines, organic and geometric forms, and a focus on function. A style, frankly, that blends natural elements with innovative materials. In the 1940s and 50s, plastics and metals, reflecting a post-war optimism and a desire for simplicity. In the historical context, of course, mid-century modern emerged as a reflection, I think, in the belief of progress, of innovation, of a new way of living. And it was influenced, of course, by modernist principles from Europe, like the Bauhaus, and adapted, certainly on this side of the Atlantic, to American tastes. Transatlantic security architecture, at the same time, developed in the immediate aftermath of World War II, focused on preventing future global conflicts, countering Russian or Soviet expansion, and rebuilding Europe through structures like the Marshall Plan. Mid-century modern, in terms of architecture, aimed to improve daily life through better design, making public spaces, for instance, more efficient and aesthetically pleasing, while transatlantic security architecture aimed to ensure peace and stability by creating strategic military and political alliances, allowing in that space a level of security, stability, and prosperity that had been unknown in that part of the world, certainly in Europe, until that time. Now, not to carry this metaphor too far, but I think it's important to note the parallel between mid-century modern architecture that profoundly influenced American and European lifestyles, partially because of the security that they had through alliances like NATO. And the impact of that security continues to be felt to this day. The transatlantic security architecture defined much of the global political landscape during the Cold War period, influencing our defense policies, international relations, global security, and of course continues to shape geopolitics all around the world, well beyond the Euro-Atlantic area of responsibility. So in short, I think it's interesting to think about the influences on our world that cross between things like architecture and our own security, and structures like NATO, alliances where people come together with new ideas about how we can promote stability and opportunities, sharing common values to promote our own betterment of our societies, to advance in terms of prosperity and economic goals. Now, I think it's important, of course, to remember that NATO's primary focus is as a defensive alliance, and our commitment to defend one another, as the Washington Summit Declaration said just a couple of months ago, commit to defend one another and every inch of Allied territory at all times, as enshrined in Article 5 of the Washington Treaty, that is ironclad. And let's not forget, as we look at NATO in the 21st century, that now 32 allies came together in Washington, and their leaders committed unanimously, of course, because NATO operates by full consensus, committed to this declaration, reminding the world, and certainly those who seek to destabilize not just our North Atlantic region, but also global security and stability more broadly, that Article 5 of the Washington Treaty is ironclad. And it says further in the Summit Declaration that we'll continue to ensure collective defense against all threats and from all directions based on a 360-degree approach to fulfill NATO's three core tasks of deterrence and defense, crisis prevention and management, and cooperative security. We're bound together, of course, by shared values, individual liberty, human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. And we adhere to international law and the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations, and are committed to upholding the rules-based international order. And so I think that's a great way to launch really a few more words about the NATO and the security environment that we find in the 21st century. It is, of course, an era in 2024 when we find ourselves in an environment where traditional borders of conflict have blurred. Military strength remains a key pillar of national security. Threats increasingly emerge from unconventional actors and across multiple domains. Non-state actors, such as terrorist groups and cyber criminals, have access to sophisticated technologies and can disrupt critical infrastructure, undermine democratic institutions, and attack our economies. We're certainly reminded of that today, the 13th of September, when just 2 days ago, September 11th, we recall 23 years ago the attacks on the United States that so changed our world. It's also important to note in the NATO context that that was the first and only time that Article 5 has been declared in terms of all of the NATO allies at that time, including already Hungary, which had joined the alliance with others in 1999, declaring their support with the United States that had been attacked, something that still resonates on this side of the Atlantic with the American people, for whom NATO remains a very positive development, despite some of the rhetoric that we've heard in recent years. In fact, we've seen, I think, NATO strengthened and supported as reflected in the response to the 75th anniversary that we celebrated in Washington just recently. It's important to know that while we deal with issues like hybrid warfare, state and non-state actors combining military power with economic coercion, disinformation campaigns, cyber operations, these are all elements of the 21st century security environment with which not just NATO, but all of us must deal. We have to rethink the very concept of of warfare to reflect those 21st century realities. But at the same time, the authoritarian states, including Russia, China, and Iran, seek to reshape the international order to suit their own interests and the interests of their leaders, if not the interests of their countries and their peoples. So NATO's commitment to members' sovereignty, to protecting sovereignty and territorial integrity, remains unwavering, but we also have to respond to an environment in which projecting power is not limited to military might and extends to these other areas: technology, trade, and influence. Cybersecurity, of course, has become a frontline issue for NATO. That was reflected very much in the summit communique once again. We've seen cyber attacks that can disrupt critical infrastructure, government operations, even military communications. All of this, of course, plays out in Ukraine, which reflects, after the full-scale invasion by Russia of Ukraine, unprovoked, something that has shattered, frankly, peace and stability in the Euro-Atlantic area and gravely undermined global security. Those exact words come from the Washington Summit Declaration, again, a declaration that was agreed to by all 32 NATO allies and their leaders. Russia remains the most significant and direct threat to allies' security. And while terrorism in all its forms and manifestations is the most direct asymmetric threat to the security of our citizens and to international peace and prosperity. It's important to know as well that we face economic challenges, the cost of providing security in a world that had hoped we'd move beyond the types of expenses on defense that we saw after the end of the Cold War, where we downsized defense budgets, where we withdrew, on the United States' part, troops and equipment from Europe. That reality was changed partially, of course, after 9/11 and the war on terrorism, but the hope, too, that we had entered an era when we could count on broader friendships, including Russia, in the post-Cold War era. Those were dashed, beginning, of course, with 2008, the Russian invasion of Georgia, but in 2014, Crimea, and then what we've seen now for almost 3 years, the horrific war that continues in Ukraine. And so I think we see the importance of NATO emerging and remaining very much in the minds, not just of those of you involved in the think tank world and academia, in policy making, but among populations as well in allied countries. Both Sweden and Finland, for instance, saw after Russia's invasion a huge burst of support among their populations who, through referenda, supported their countries joining NATO, something that even at U.S. European Command, where I served from 2017 to 2019, we didn't expect, because those two countries were happy, and we were happy with them as strong partners in the alliance. But they saw from the threat, the military threat that Putin's Russia posed, that it was important to join the alliance as full members, to be part of that Article 5 guarantee. So today we find ourselves in this environment where traditional borders of conflict have blurred. In the 21st century, military strength remains a key pillar of national security, and the resources to maintain that strength have got to be provided for. As you've seen, now fully 2/3 of NATO's allies are meeting the goals that they presented to themselves and agreed upon in terms of defense spending. But more importantly, the alliance as a whole, collectively, is meeting that goal, and they are doing that with the key purposes of coordinating efforts, coordinating resources to maintain the strong defense that NATO provides. While the unconventional threats are proliferating in the 21st century, as we've already discussed, great power competition as we've seen with Russia's action, has resurged. And I think while some felt that the unity and resolve of the alliance was going to be tested by Russia's invasion of Ukraine, it actually underscored the importance of NATO's deterrence and defense posture, particularly on the eastern flank of the alliance. And Hungary should know that as well as any country, given your history. But NATO has taken decisive action to bolster collective defense. We know about deployments of battle groups in the Baltics, in Poland, enhancing military presence in the Black Sea region. And it, of course, reminds us, as the NATO communique does, and NATO's own strategic position, that China and its rise as a global power, a decisive enabler of Russia, brings new dynamics to NATO's strategic calculus. Now, NATO, of course, is not an Indo-Pacific alliance, but the consequences of China's expanding military power and indeed economic influence, its investments in critical infrastructure in Europe, again, as this decisive enabler of Russia's unprovoked actions, and increasing assertiveness in areas such as artificial intelligence and surveillance technologies require a coordinated response. So once again, NATO in this new security environment of the 21st century is stepping up to play the role that has been so critical for 75 years. There is a need for technological superiority, and it is together as allies, with the sharing of science and innovation in the greatest traditions of all of our countries, that technology and innovation will maintain our security edge. NATO collectively has to harness the power of emerging technologies such as AI, quantum computing, biotechnology, space technology, while protecting against their misuse, something that is important for all of us to coordinate with, including with the European Union, which of course Hungary is also a part of. So the commitment to strengthening technological base and ensuring innovation supports our defense and security is a key part of that, something I've become even more aware of since leaving diplomacy after 31 years in the State Department and working now in the private sector as a consultant and an advisor with the Albright Stonebridge Group, an organization, a company established by Madeleine Albright after she was Secretary of State. She promoted the concept of bringing the private sector into these important issues, commercial diplomacy, as we call it, to lead development of next generation capabilities across the private sector. We've seen this now in NATO's Innovation Fund, initiatives like Diana, the Defense Innovation Accelerator for the North Atlantic. These are vital steps in this direction, and something I think all NATO member states should be taking advantage of and realizing how important this can be not only to our defense, but to our collective economies, the opportunities there for growth and partnership. Strengthening partnerships and resilience are a key part of addressing the new security environment in the 21st century. It is indeed a global issue, and while NATO's core mission is to protect its members, recognizing that security today is global in scope, these partnerships that we've mentioned, including countries like Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand, help to extend stability beyond the Euro-Atlantic area. So it's, I think, an opportunity to renew the call to unity and commitment, to think about the values that we share, where we have come since that mid-century period. Think about where Hungary was mid-century. Think about where we've all moved since the end of the Cold War, since the expansion of our alliance, which has components to address our economic challenges, as well as the critical security guarantees that are so crucial for providing the stability that allows our economies to flourish. We look to the future. I would suggest again that NATO's greatest strength remains that unity, our shared commitment to the values of democracy, those values that seemed so new, so exciting to the generation in 1993, to individual liberties, the rule of law. That's what sets us apart from those who seek to undermine the international order. It's an era in the 21st century of very rapid change and uncertainty, and that bonds solidarity among NATO members and makes that bond more important than ever. It's an era that demands, as I said, constant adaptation and innovation. NATO has faced countless challenges in its 75-year history, but each time the alliance has emerged stronger. I think we saw that clearly with the 75th anniversary. I think NATO is moving ahead, certainly after the forward-looking review process that produced the new security strategic concept for NATO in recent years. Our security is collective, and so too is our future. So I want to end these remarks by again apologizing that I can't be with you in person. I look forward to hearing about the discussions that you have, hopefully to joining you again in the future. But from this side of the Atlantic in Washington, let me just thank again the organizers, Tamás, Reeker, all of you who have worked so hard to bring together this group in beautiful Budapest. Let's recommit ourselves to NATO's enduring mission to safeguard the freedom and security of all our citizens, to promote peace and stability in a world that certainly needs it now more than ever. So, Köszönöm szépen, ennyit akartam mondani. That's all I want to say, as they taught us in a Hungarian class. Have a very good conference, enjoy the discussions, and enjoy the beauties of Budapest. Thank you.